In the fractured, chaotic heart of the Vale of Anasazi, mercy was a concept as alien as the species who had just discovered it. Searcher Alara Vex of the Silith Lumina felt the anomaly before her instruments confirmed it. It was not the cold, sharp resonance of a dead ship. Those were plentiful here, their metallic corpses tangled in the gravimetric shoals. This was something else. A feeling, a small, tight, painful knot of fear, broadcast on a frequency her crystalline, 8-foot-tall form was uniquely designed to receive. Captain Kaelrin, she chimed, her thoughts a melody of soft, concerned notes to her ship's commander. I have a non-Silith resonance. Quadrant 4, it is. Distress. Biological, singular. Kaelrin, his own ancient, faceted body a deep, steady sapphire, turned his attention from the swirling nebula on the main viewer. Protocol is clear, Searcher. The Vale is a graveyard, not a nursery. Uncontacted species are to be logged and avoided. The Conclave law is absolute. We do not interfere. It feels small, Alara Vex pulsed, pushing against the protocol. Her skin, a network of living, pale blue crystal, flickered with empathy. It feels alone. It is afraid. Fear is a common element in the Vale, Kaelrin chimed, not unkindly. It is a predator's lure. We will log it and proceed to the Kratos relay. Alara Vex felt a sharp, illogical spike of defiance. She was a searcher. Her life was dedicated to finding what was lost. She would not log this feeling as debris. She angled her small scout ship, the starlights echo away from the main vessel. I am going to verify the sensor reading, Captain. A closer look. I will not make contact. She didn't wait for his reply, a breach of conduct that sent a shiver of transgression through her form. She pushed the echo into the thickest part of the shoal, her ship's resonance drive singing a path through the tumbling asteroids and pockets of temporal distortion. The feeling grew stronger, hot, wet, chaotic. It was messy. It was loud in her mind. She found it a pod, barely the size of her own vessel. It was a brutalist, ugly thing of scorched gray metal scarred by micrometeor impacts. It was primitive, clearly not FDL capable. A life pod. One side was torn open, exposing the void. But her sensors read a single, tiny, pressurized compartment, its life support failing, its heat signature a pathetic flicker. And the feeling, it was a scream of terror and grief and cold. Kaelrin, it is an escape pod. Pre-contact. The occupant is a juvenile. It is dying. The captain's reply was a chime of pure frustration. Alara Vex, you place us all at risk. Return now. To interfere is to contaminate. What if it is a plague? It is a child, she sent back, her own light flashing. She made her choice. She powered down her comm. She latched the echo onto the pod, a delicate, dangerous maneuver. She extended her own life support field, a bubble of pale blue energy, and breached the pod's failing hull. The creature inside was disgusting. That was the first logical thought that came to her. It was a small, fleshy, soft thing bundled in thick, primitive fabric. It was huddled against a cold bulkhead, shivering, its face wet with leaking saline. It was pink. It had fur on its head. It was making a noise. A horrible, wet, gasping sound. It looked up. It had two large blue eyes set forward like a predator's. When it saw her towering crystalline form, her featureless, glowing face, it screamed. The sound was a physical blow. A raw animal sound that made her want to recoil. But underneath the scream, she felt its essence. It wasn't a predator. It wasn't a plague. It was just a child lost, terrified, dying. It is all right, she projected, not in words, but in a feeling. A wave of calm blue warmth. A feeling of shelter. The child stopped screaming. It sniffled, wiping its face with a fleshy paw. It stared at her. Cold, it seemed to project back, a simple, broken concept. Alara Vex extended her hand, a long, faceted appendage. She touched the boy's forehead. He was hot, burning up, fever. His pod was dead. He was in a void suit, but it was failing. She made her second choice. She unlatched him from his seat, scooped up the tiny, warm, heavy creature, and carried him through the breach back to her own ship. She brought him back to the Lumina. Kaelrin was furious. The crew was terrified. They put her and the creature in a decontamination bay. You have condemned us, Alara Vex. Kael'rin's chimes were sharp with fear. The Conclave will shatter our charter. We are a minor species. We survive on their mercy, and you have broken their first law. Look, Captain, Ilara Vex projected through the glass. The boy was on a medbed. She had given him a nutrient pack, and he was drinking it greedily. He was no longer shivering. He was a boy. His name is Jonah, she chimed softly. She had formed a simple telepathic link. He was from a ship, a colony ship, the Odyssey. It had been attacked by something. He called them Reavers. He was the only one who made it to a pod. He was a human. They kept him for 3 rotations. Ilara Vex taught him how to say her name. He couldn't form the chimes. He called her Ella. She taught him a Silith greeting, a touch of fingers to the heartlight. He showed her a small carved wooden bird, something his father, had given him. And then the humans came. It wasn't a ship. It was a fleet, 3 of them, TCS Endurance, TCS Resolve, TCS Vengeance. They tore out of hyperspace, primitive, brutal, loud. Their ships were gray, blocky, and bristling with crude, kinetic weaponry. Their comms roared on all frequencies. This is Commander Eva Rostova of the Terran Concordat. You are harboring a human survivor. Release him or be fired upon. We will not warn you again. Kael'rin was shaking, his sapphire light pale. They are like the Reavers. They are savages. Ilara Vex, this is what you have brought us. No, Captain, Ilara Vex said, her voice strangely calm. She took Jonah's small, fleshy hand. They're just afraid, like he was. She walked, alone, to the main airlock, leading the small human boy. She opened a channel. This is Searcher Ilara Vex of the Lumina. We have your child. He is safe. We are bringing him to you. She walked into the airlock bay as the Endurance docked, its clamp slamming into their hull with a force that shook the ship. The door opened. A dozen human soldiers burst through, covered in black, heavy armor carrying slug-thrower rifles. They were shouting. At their head was a woman, Rostova, her helmet off, her face a mask of fury and desperate hope. They saw Jonah, and all the noise, all the fury stopped. The soldiers froze. Rostova's hard face crumbled. A sound like Jonah's in the pod, a gasping sob tore from her throat. Jonah, she whispered. Aunt Eva, the boy shouted, and he ran, letting go of Ilara Vex's hand, and slammed into the armored woman's legs. Rostova fell to her knees, her rifle clattering to the deck. She crushed the boy to her, her entire body shaking. The other soldiers lowered their weapons, their own faces a mixture of stunned, weeping relief. They were emotional. They were messy. They were human. Rostova looked up at Ilara Vex, her blue eyes streaming tears. She stood, helping Jonah up. She approached the tall, crystalline alien who had broken every law for her nephew. She didn't know Silith protocol, so she did a human one. She bowed, a deep, formal military bow of respect. I have no words, Rostova said, her voice thick. You saved him. You showed him mercy, when the universe showed him none. Ilara Vex remembered the human word Jonah had taught her from his father's stories. He's mercy when none is required. She placed her fingers on her own heartlight. Rostova reached to her neck and pulled off a small silver chain. On it was a simple, polished metal disc stamped with the Terran Concordat symbol, a hand holding a leaf, a gunshot, and a shield. We call this a Concordat token, Rostova said. She pressed it into Ilara Vex's crystalline hand. It's not enough, but it means we, humanity, remembers we owe you. One day, if your people are ever in need, you show this to us, and the galaxy will see what happens. We will not forget. Ilara Vex closed her hand around the token. It was warm. 30 standard cycles later, Ambassador Ilaravex of the Silith Lumina stood in the Grand Hall of the Kratos Citadel. The Concordat token was gone, archived back on her homeworld Silene, a relic of a strange, emotional first contact that had earned her a formal reprimand and a surprising promotion. Her illogical empathy, it turned out, had forged the first treaty between the Conclave and the aggressive, newly discovered Terran Concordat. Now humanity was a problem for the whole council, not just her. Hall was a cavern of polished black marble and floating, glowing orbs of light. Seated in their ascending pods were the council elders, the cold, logical Ethenian arbiters, beings of pure, calcified thought, the gaseous, unfathomable Xylos Prime. And at their head, High Arbiter Thelonious, a being so ancient and logical he rarely moved, his crystalline form a pillar of cold, white light. Today the hall was not calm. It was tense. The new problem was here. Standing in the center of the floor, arrogant and massive, was Warlord Harkin of the Vorlag. The Vorlag were a new, terrifying, expansionist power. They were 9-foot-tall, quad-armed, Ursine-canned hybrids, covered in thick black fur and brutal iron armor pierced with the bones of their enemies. They were strength. They despised weakness. And they had just conquered the entire Orion Spur, enslaving 3 conclave protectorates. Now they were at the border of Silith space. Tribute Harkin's voice was a deep, roaring bass that shook Ilaravex's crystalline form. His translator was crude, making his words sound like cracking rock. The worlds of the Silith are weak. They are soft. They will provide the Vorlag hegemony with 10,000 labor units and 100 tons of Krelium ore per cycle as tribute. In exchange, we will protect them. A cold silence followed labor units. He meant slaves, he meant her people. High Arbiter Thelonious finally spoke, his voice a cold, passionless chime in their minds. Warlord Harkin, the Silith are a minor, non-strategic asset. However, their sector is under conclave protection. Your protection is logic. It is talk. Harkin slammed one of his massive lower fists onto the marble floor, cracking it. I speak strength. The Silith are weak. We are strong. This is the true logic. A sacrifice of the Silith is efficient. It will prevent a war with us. You will accept, or we will take Silene, and then we will take yours. Thelonious was silent. He was considering it. Ilaravex felt a cold dread. He was actually going to sacrifice her people to appease these monsters. Ambassador Ilaravex, Thelonious chimed, his light turning to her. Your people are artists, not warriors. The logic of Warlord Harkin is brutal but sound. A war with the Vorlag would cost trillions of lives. A tribute of 10,000. Is slavery? A new voice cut in. It wasn't a chime. It wasn't a roar. It was a voice, warm, baritone, and furious. Kalen Vance, High Ambassador of the Terran Concordat, stepped forward. He was tall for his species, but looked like a child next to Harkin. He wore a simple dark blue Concordat uniform, unarmored, unadorned. His face was calm, but his eyes were not. High Arbiter Kalen said, his voice echoing in the vast hall, the Concordat must, respectfully, disagree with your logic. There is no logic in slavery. There is no efficiency in tyranny. It is simply theft, theft of life, theft of liberty. Harkin snorted a wet, derisive sound. The flesh things speak. The mercy givers, you are like the Silith human soft. Your Concordat is weak. You give warnings. You give mercy. You are inefficient. We are civilized, Warlord, Kalen replied, his voice never rising. He stepped past Harkin and stood beside Ilaravex. He gave her a small, reassuring nod. She had known Kalen for 20 years. He was her closest friend on this cold, logical station. He was the only other emotional being in the hall. The Silith people are under the formal protection of the Terran Concordat by Treaty of Heased Cycle 34 Delta. Kalen announced. Thelonious flashed a sharp, annoyed white. That is a mythical treaty, Ambassador. It is based on a single sentimental incident involving a searcher's breach of protocol. It is not logical. It's human, High Arbiter, Kalen said softly, and to us, that makes it binding. He turned to face Harkin. The human ambassador barely came up to the Vorlag's chest plates. Warlord Harkin, of the Vorlag hegemony, Kalen said, his PNG voice suddenly formal, carrying a new cold weight. You have threatened a signatory of the Concordat. You have threatened a species that showed us mercy, when none was required. By the authority of the Terran Concordat, I am issuing you your first and only warning. The hull went dead silent. Withdraw your fleets from Silith space. Release your labor units from the Orion Spur, and return to your own borders. Do this, and you will receive the mercy of the Concordat. We will not fire. We will negotiate a new peace. Harkin stared at him for a long second. Then he laughed. It was a deep, booming, savage laugh that echoed off the marble. The other delegates flinched. A warning, the flesh thing warns me. You will negotiate, little human, because you are afraid to fight. You are all afraid. This is why we will rule. He spat on the floor, a thick, viscous glob. My answer is no. My fleet invades Silene now, and when I am done with their soft, pretty world, I am coming for yours. Harkin turned and stomped out of the hall, his iron-shod boots cracking the floor with every step. Kalen Vance stood in the silence, his face pale, his expression unreadable. You have doomed them, Ambassador, Thelonious chimed, his voice a funeral dirge. Your emotional, illogical posturing has doomed an entire species. Your mercy fleet is 3 sectors away. You cannot possibly stop him in time. This is the failure of your philosophy. Kalen turned to Ilara Vex. She was trembling, her blue light dim with abject terror. She had been relying on him, on humanity, and he had just issued a warning, a piece of paper. Kalen, she chimed, her voice a broken melody. He looked at her, and his face was a mask of grief, but his eyes were cold steel. He's right, High Arbiter, Kalen said, his voice quiet. Our mercy fleet is too far away. He tapped his comm. Ambassador Vance to TCS Vigilance. Admiral Rostova. Harkin has refused. He is invading Silene. Thelonious scoffed. What's this? A performance of despair. Kalen listened to his comm. He nodded. I understand, Admiral. He looked up, his face a picture of tragedy. Hypertor, Warlord Harkin has made his choice, and in doing so, he has just sentenced his entire species to death. Thelonious froze. What? He's right, our mercy fleet is 3 sectors away at the Kratos relay, Kalen said, but that's a peacekeeper fleet. We never said where our war fleet was. Ilara Vex looked up, confused. War fleet. The first fleet, Ambassador, Kalen said, his voice dropping. The Reaper fleet. The ones we don't talk about in council. The ones who don't give warnings. They have been in covert, cloaked orbit of Silene for 3 days waiting for Harkin to make a choice. He looked at the horrified, silent hall. Warlord Harkin is about to find out why humanity loves to give warnings. It's not because we're weak. It's because we are terrified of what happens when we stop. Silene was a world of pale blue light and singing mountains. Its cities were living, spiraling crystalline structures that grew in harmony with the land, each one a unique work of art. The Silith people, like Ilara Vex, were a species of artists and philosophers. They had no standing army. They had no weapons of war. Their planetary defense grid was a metaphor, a system designed to deflect micrometeors, not Mauler-class battleships. When the Vorlag hegemony fleet tore open hyperspace on the edge of their system, the planet Silene did not panic. It fell into a state of collective paralyzed grief. It was the end of all things. Warlord Harkin's new flagship, the Iron Fang, was a 5-kilometer behemoth of pitted black iron, its surface bristling with kinetic cannons and slave pens open to the void. His armada of 1,000 ships was a swarm of locusts ready to devour a field. Sensors report. Harkin roared from his command throne, which was welded to the deck. Total system scan, Warlord. His tactician, a smaller, weasel-like Vorlag, snarled. It's clean. Just as the Council said, the Silith Defense Fleet is 4 small meteor cutters. The Human Mercy Fleet is confirmed at the Kratos Relay 3 sectors away. The planet is ours. Harkin laughed a deep, satisfying bellow. The human ambassador's empty threat had been delicious. He would savor this conquest. He would take that crystalline woman, Alaravex, as his personal trophy after this. All ships begin planetary approach. Launch the boarding parties. I want the labor units collared and in the holds by the next cycle. Do not damage the merchandise, but do break their spirit. I want to hear them weep. The Vorlag armada roared forward, a wave of iron and fury ready to crash upon the defenseless planet. They passed the orbit of Silene's second moon, a small dead rock named Ethene's Tear. And the human First Fleet uncloaked. It was not a fleet. It was a wall of black iron. One moment, Harkin's sensors showed empty space. The next 500 Terran dreadnoughts were there. They had been hiding in the moon's gravitational shadow, running cold, their cloaking systems, a technology the Conclave didn't even know existed. These were not the sleek, white peacekeeper ships. These were the Reaper ships. The TCS Retribution, the TCS Finality, the TCS Hallowed Silence. They were wedge-shaped, brutal, and scarred. They had no windows. They had no elegance. They were flying engines with guns the size of Harkin's corvettes. Harkin's entire fleet stalled. The sudden mass of the Terran fleet threw their navigation computers into chaos. What is this? Where did they come from? Harkin roared, his arrogance instantly incinerated by a cold, primal fear. On the bridge of the TCS Retribution, Admiral Eva Rostova sat in her command chair. She was no longer in her White Mercy uniform. She wore the Reaper Protocol armor, a suit of stark black battle plate, her face bare, her eyes as cold as the void. She hated this. She hated what her species had to become. She hated the Vorlag for making her do it. Her tactical officer's voice was a calm, dead monotone. Admiral, we are in position. The Vorlag fleet is in a state of total disarray. Their weapons are cold. They are in perfect killing formation. They have no idea what to do. Rostova looked at the hollow display. She saw the Iron Fang. She saw the slave pens. Her face tightened. She remembered a small, fleshy boy lost in a pod. She remembered the kindness of a crystalline alien. She remembered heased. Open a channel, she commanded. Her voice was broadcast to the entire Vorlag fleet, cold, calm, and final. This is Admiral Eva Rostova of the Terran Concordat First Fleet. You were offered mercy. You chose war. You are a species that understands only strength. Allow us to be your final teachers. Harkin was screaming, now furious, terrified. Fire, fire, AT-will. Break, THEIR line. They are flesh. They WILL break. The Vorlag fleet, in a panic, fired. 1,000 kinetic cannons unleashed a storm of iron slugs at the human wall. Shields, Rostova said calmly. The Terran ships flashed as their gravity shields caught the projectiles. The slugs didn't explode. They stopped dead in space, held in a stasis field 100 meters from the hulls. The Vorlag stopped firing. They watched in horror as a cloud of their own ammunition now hung motionless in front of the Terran fleet. We did not come here to fight you, warlord," Rostova's voice broadcast again, her voice laced with a terrible, aching sadness. "We came here to end you." She looked at her tactical officer, returned to sender. The Terran fleet reversed the polarity of their shields. The entire cloud of Vorlag ammunition was fired back at them at point-blank range. The front line of the Vorlag armada disintegrated in a storm of their own shrapnel. It was a massacre. Now Admiral Rostova said, "The gunshot." On the Citadel, Kalen Vance's speech had reached its climax. He had just revealed the fleet's position. The Lonius and the Council were reeling. They were realizing humanity had been lying to them for 30 years. Not just lying, but maintaining a secret, illegal war fleet in direct violation of every conclave treaty. On the main viewer, the live feed from Selene's space showed the two fleets. They watched as the Vorlag fired. They watched as the humans caught the bullets. They watched as they returned them. And then they saw it. The TCS, Retribution, Rostova's flagship, fired its main weapon. It was not a laser. It was not a missile. It was a gravity lance, a single perfectly controlled shot of unimaginable force. It did not hit a ship. It hit the Iron Fang, Harkin's flagship. The shot lanced through the void and struck the ship's main drive core. There was no sound. There was no grand explosion. The ship's reactor went critical. For one brief second, the Iron's Fang became a star, a white, blinding light, and then it imploded, its own gravity pulling it and a dozen nearby Vorlag ships into a temporary, screaming singularity. A single gunshot had just killed a warlord and erased his battleship from reality. And on the Citadel, on the TCS Retribution, in the ranks of the Vorlag Armada, there was total silence. The warnings were over. The first and last shot had been fired. And the galaxy finally understood. This was humanity, not the mercy givers, but the reapers, and they had just been unleashed. The silence lasted 4.3 seconds. To Admiral Rostova, it was an eternity, a final moment of peace before the butcher's work truly began. To the Vorlag, it was a system-crashing shock. Their warlord was a memory. Their flagship was void dust. Their own ammunition had been used to gut their front line. Their philosophy of strength had just been rendered obsolete. A Vorlag captain, somewhere in the panicked, broken armada, made a choice, not to fight, but to run. His mauler turned, its engines flaring to enter hyperspace. Tactical Rostova's voice was a blade of ice. "That's one, take it." "Aye, Admiral." Firing a harpoon, the officer replied, his voice equally flat. From the TCS, hallowed silence, a single, long, thin missile launched. It didn't scream in like a dumbfire rocket. It jumped. It engaged its own miniature FTL drive for a fraction of a second, tearing a hole in space and emerging directly in front of the fleeing Vorlag ship's main engine bell. It struck and buried itself deep in the reactor. The ship didn't explode. It stalled dead in the water, its power cut. A dozen more Vorlag ships tried to jump. A dozen harpoons lanced out, crippling them all. This was the new terror. They were not being destroyed. They were being contained. They could fight. They could flee. They were trapped in a killbox of their own making with an enemy that had an answer for everything. "All ships," Rostova broadcast system-wide again. "Your warlord is dead. Your fleet is broken. Your strength is a lie. This is the turning point. This is your one and only chance to live." She hated what she was about to do. Kalen had authorized Reaper protocol, but she was the one who had to wield it. She was an admiral, but she was also the aunt who had held a lost boy who had been saved by an alien's kindness. She would not become Harkin. She would not commit genocide when a conversion was possible. Power down your weapons, lock your engines, and purge your slave holds, or we will purge you. On the Citadel, the Council was losing its collective mind. This was a human, a Terran admiral, dictating terms of total surrender to a fleet that 10 minutes ago had been the boogeyman of the galaxy. High Arbiter Thelonious was shaking. His crystalline form was a riot of red, furious light. This was illogical. The humans had cheated. They had broken the rules. Ambassador Vance Thelonious's voice was a psychic shriek in the hall. You will stop this. You have violated 10,000 conclave treaties. You have deployed illegal cloaking technology. You have deployed gravity lance weaponry. You have assassinated a council-recognized leader. You are condemned. Your entire species is condemned. Kalen Vance, who had been watching the tactical display with a grim, terrible pride, turned his head slowly. He looked at the High Arbiter. He was no longer the polite, emotional ambassador. He was the voice of protocol, Reaper. Condemned by you. Kalen's voice was soft, but it cut through Thelonious's rage like a diamond. You sit in your logical tower and condemn the firefighters for scratching the paint while they put out the inferno you allowed to start. He gestured to the screen where the Vorlag fleet was, panicked. Some ships were firing on each other in their terror. You were willing to sacrifice the entire Silith species, a member of your own conclave asterisk, for a logical peace. We were willing to risk a war to save one of them. That is the difference between us, Thelonious. Your logic is hollow. It is a void. Ours is human. This is treason. The Conclave will not stand for this. I am ordering the sit. You are ordering nothing, High Arbiter, Kalen said, his voice dropping to a whisper, but somehow filling the entire hall. You see, we knew you would do this. We knew you would betray your own laws for logic. We knew. You were the real enemy, not Harkin. He was just a bully. You are a rot. Thelonious froze. What did you say? The Reaper Protocol. It's not just a fleet, Arbiter, Kalen said, a terrible, sad smile on his face. It's an idea. It is the end of mercy, and we are no longer offering it to you. Kalen tapped his console. Ambassador Vance to TCS, hidden hand. Phase 2 is authorized. Thelonious looked confused. Hidden hand, there is no ship by that, nah. His words stopped. His crystalline form twitched. In the Citadel's own command center, 2 levels below the hall, something uncloaked. Not a ship, a person, a human, in a black stealth suit. A Terran ghost operative. He had been in the Citadel for months, waiting. The ghost operative didn't attack anyone. He slammed a data spike into the Citadel's core logic engine. And everything Thelonious had ever done was broadcast. The main screen in the hall changed. The battle at Silene vanished. It was replaced by a recording, a secret meeting between High Arbiter Thelonious and Warlord Harkin from 3 cycles ago. The audio played. It was Thelonious offering Harkin the Orion Spur. It was Thelonious suggesting that the Silith were a logical next step for tribute. It was Thelonious who had orchestrated the entire crisis to test humanity's resolve and expose their mercy fleet as a paper tiger. He had betrayed the Conclave. He had betrayed the Silith. He had started the entire war. The hall was silent. But this was not the silence of awe. This was the silence of a vacuum, the silence of total, absolute betrayal. Thelonious looked at the screen. He looked at Kalen Vance. His crystalline form was flickering, his logic engine crashing. He had been outmaneuvered. He had been beaten, not by a fleet, but by a human's capacity for patience. They had waited. They had known. They had let him walk into his own trap. How Thelonious whispered, his psychic voice cracked chime. Mercy, High Arbiter, Kalen said, his voice full of a terrible human grief, is a shield we offer to our friends, but to our enemies. We offer rope, and you have been braiding yours for 30 years. Kalen Vance turned his back on the Hypertor. He faced the rest of the council, the gaseous Xylos, the insectoid Rylaxians, the scores of minor species who had lived in terror of both the Vorlag and the Conclave. The Ethanian Conclave is dissolved by act of treason, Kalen announced, his PNG voice ringing with a new terrible authority. The Vorlag Armada is under new management. Humanity is now assuming control of all Conclave security. A new Concordat will be formed, one based not on cold logic, but on real mercy and real consequences. He looked at them, his eyes burning. This is not a debate. This is a warning, our last one. The revelation was complete. The galaxy wasn't just at war with the Vorlag. The galaxy was at war with itself, and humanity had just won. The climax of the war was not a single battle. It was a conversion. In the cold void over Silene, the remnants of the Vorlag Armada floated, crippled and silent. The Reaper fleet, a ring of black, patient judgment, held them in a cage of harpoon missiles and gravity lances. The Vorlag were a species built on the logic of strength. They followed the strongest, and their warlord had been erased by an enemy that caught bullets. Now they were leaderless, terrified, and listening. Admiral Rostova's voice broadcast into their chaos. You were a tool used by a corrupt arbiter and a weak-willed warlord. Harkin led you to ruin. He taught you that taking was strength. He was wrong. Strength is building. Strength is protecting. Her dreadnought, the TCS Retribution, moved slowly, not towards the Vorlag, but past them, placing itself between the Armada and the planet Silene. It was a symbol, a shield. You have a choice, Rostova continued, her voice softening, losing its Reaper edge, regaining its human core. You can die here for a lie, or you can live for a purpose. The Ethanian Conclave is gone. The traitor Thelonious is in irons. The galaxy is in chaos. The old logic is dead. On the bridge of a dozen Vorlag maulers, captains, and Centurions were listening. They were a brutal species, but they were not stupid. They had been beaten. They had been humbled, and now they were being given an offer. We are forming a new Concordat, Rostova said. One that protects the weak and punishes the wicked. We need strength. We need warriors. Your ships are strong. Your bodies are powerful. But your philosophy is broken. So we will give you a new one. She pointed her ship not at the Vorlag, but at the void. There are other monsters in the dark beyond this galaxy, the Reavers who attacked our ships, the Void Screamers in the Anasazi Vale, things you are strong enough to fight, things the Silith are not. Serve us, Rostova's voice was a challenge. Serve the new Concordat. Become the shield you were meant to be instead of the hammer you became. Pledge your strength to us, to Ambassador Kalen Vance, and you will be rebuilt. You will be forgiven. This is your only offer. This is our mercy. On the Citadel, the Council watched, paralyzed with terror and awe. The humans weren't just destroying their enemy. They were recruiting them. They were reforging them. In the hall, Thelonious was on his knees, his light a dull, sickly gray. His own sentinels were guarding him, their optics a cool human blue. He had been beaten by the one thing his logic could never account for, a change of heart. Back at Silene, a Vorlag captain, a massive, scarred female named Grakla, made her choice. Her ship was crippled. Her crew was panicked. She saw the logic in Rostova's words. The strength. Power down weapons, Grakla roared to her crew. She opened a channel. This is Captain Grakla of the Iron Fist. We accept. We will serve. Tell us what to do. One by one, the crippled, broken Vorlag Armada powered down. They did not surrender. They defected. The climax of the war was the end of the Vorlag hegemony and the birth of the Concordat's Iron Legion. On the surface of Silene, the real climax was happening. Admiral Rostova's shuttle had landed in the ruined Crystal Temple. Her Reaper Marines, black-armored and silent, secured the perimeter. They found the panicked Vorlag soldiers who had been abandoned by Harkin. The Vorlag threw down their chain axes. They knew what was happening in orbit. They surrendered to a force they finally respected. Rostova walked alone into the ruins. She saw Ilarovex. The tall, crystalline ambassador was on her knees, her hands stained with the oil and blood of Harkin's slug-thrower. She was weeping, a silent, shimmering vibration of grief and shame. She had killed, she had broken her own people's first and only law. Ilarovex, Rostova's voice was soft. She knelt, her black armor groaning. She was face to face with the Silith. Ilarovex looked up, her light dim. I killed him, Eva, she chimed weakly, using the human name she hadn't used in decades. I am a monster, like him. No, Rostova said, her voice fierce, unyielding. She reached out and put her gauntleted hand on Ilarovex's shoulder, a mirror of Ilarovex's first contact with Jonah. You defended your home. You ended a tyrant. You did what we could not. He was your kill, ambassador. You earned it. Ilarovex looked at the human admiral. She saw no judgment, only respect and a shared grief, the grief of those who have to do the hard things. Rostova helped her to her feet. The Silith ambassador leaned on the human Reaper admiral. It was a picture of the new galaxy. It's over, Ilarovex chimed. No, Rostova said, looking up at her black fleet, now moving to rescue the Silith stations to liberate the other slave ships. It's not over. It's just begun. Kalen has shattered the old logic. Now we have to build the new one. And it's going to be messy. Ilarovex looked at the human token she had clutched in her hand for 30 years. She reached out and pressed it into Rostova's armored palm. Tell Kalen, she chimed, her light beginning to shine a pale new blue again, that he's is repaid, and tell him the Silith are ready to learn how to build. Rostova closed her fist around the token. He knows, ambassador. He always knew. The great silence that followed the gunshot was a reckoning. In the grand hall of the Kratos citadel, High Arbiter Thelonious, the being of pure logic, was led away in crystalline chains by his own sentinels. His empire of cold equations had been solved by a human variable he had never thought to include: morality. The delegates of the old conclave were in a state of paralyzed panic. Their leader was a traitor. Their enforcers, the Vorlag, were now slaves to their victims, the humans, and their mediators, the humans again, had just proven to be the most terrifying warrior species in galactic history. Kalen Vance stood at the center of the hall not as an ambassador, but as the de facto leader of the galaxy. The silence was so total, the drip of water from a Xylos containment tank echoed like a thunderclap. Every eye was on him, waiting. What would the humans do now? Would they conquer them? Would they enslave them, as Thelonious had done? Would they pass judgment? Kalen looked at their terrified, panicked, guilty faces. He saw species who had been willing to sacrifice the Silith for their own safety. He saw the rot of indifference. And he pitied them. His voice, when he spoke, was no longer the cold voice of the Reaper. It was the tired, grieving voice of a mediator who had seen too much. You once looked at humanity, and you saw weakness. You saw our mercy as a flaw, our warnings as cowardice, our emotion as inefficient. You are all in your own way as guilty as Thelonious. You allowed this to happen. The hall flinched. He was right. But humanity, we are a broken species ourselves, Kalen continued, his voice softening. We know what it is to fail. We know what it is to be wrong. And that is why we believe in second chances. It is the core of who we are. He looked up at the empty throne of the High Arbiter. The Ethnian conclave is dead. Today we are forming the Terran Concordat, a new government, a new promise. It will be based on our philosophy, not cold logic, but empathy, not strength, but responsibility. He looked at the delegates. You will all be given a choice. You can join us. You can help us rebuild this broken galaxy. You can learn our ways. You can learn what he's means. Or you can refuse. A Xylos delegate, a being of brave, swirling gas, chimed in. And if we refuse, Ambassador Vance, will we face the Reaper fleet? Will we hear the gunshot? The entire galaxy waited on his answer. Kalen Vance's face was filled with an infinite, profound sadness. He shook his head. No, he whispered, if you refuse, we will leave. The hall gasped. That was worse. We will not force you to be moral, Kalen said, but we will no longer protect you from the consequences of your immorality. We will take our fleets. We will take our engineers. We will take our mercy. And we will go home. And the next time a Harkin comes to your door, the next time a plague arrives, the next time the Reavers come, you will be alone. You will be left to your logic. He let the true horror of that silence sink in. A galaxy without humanity's mercy. A galaxy without the Reapers to hold the line. It was a death sentence. That is the real gunshot, Kalen said. The silence. When we are gone, today, we showed mercy to the Vorlag. We are giving them a second chance. A chance to be better. He looked at them all, his eyes pleading, his voice finally hopeful. I'm offering you, all of you, the same. Alara Vex, her light restored, her form scarred but strong, stepped into the hall. She was flanked by a human marine and a Vorlag captain. She was the picture of the new Concordat. She walked to the center of the floor and stood next to Kalen Vance. They once showed a lost human mercy, Alara Vex chimed, her voice now carrying the strength of a Reaper and the warmth of a human, and in return, they gave us the galaxy. Choose with us. Choose heased. The gunshot had brought the silence, but it was the mercy that would rebuild the stars.